Kia ora tātou. We are joining in the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is happening around the globe in the last few days of November and into the first few days of December. And during that time, we're going to be hearing from some people, hopefully giving some good advice and hearing some stories about people's real life experiences. And so I have Erica with me here today, and she's been brave enough to share her story, and we're really grateful for that. So I know who you are, but for the people out there who don't know who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Kia ora, my name's Erica Kearse. I'm a Salvation Army officer, currently at Mount Albert Corps, married to Fraser Kearse, who's a chaplain, and I have 3 beautiful daughters.
Lovely. And so your story is, from what I understand it, that you grew up in a violent family.
That's right.
It was less than ideal, and then later on yourself as a single mum, you found yourself again in a relationship that was abusive, perhaps not a violent relationship, but one that was unsafe.
Yes.
Do you mind just telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my parents separated when I was 2, and I was raised by a single mum for a couple of years, my mum, and then she remarried when I was 4, and he was unfortunately a troublesome person, was very abusive and controlling, particularly violent. I can't remember a day in my childhood where I was not abused physically.
Wow.
I was literally told every day, no one loves you, no one wants you, you're worthless. So you can imagine how freeing it was for me when I became a Christian many years down the track and realised that there's a God who's a father who loves you.
Wow, yeah.
He was the polar opposite of my biological father, so I didn't see my biological father a lot growing up because of custody stuff, but he was, in contrast, a very loving, caring person, never raised his voice in my life, and probably the safest person I know on the planet. So there was this real contrast of family and growing up of my mum and my stepdad and my half-brother, where there was a lot of verbal and physical abuse and very, very strict and controlling ways. And then there was my biological father, who was very loving, very gentle, very caring. So there were these, I kind of lived in 2 worlds growing up. And married my first husband when I was 21, met him when I was 17, so I was quite young when I met him. And at first, we were together for 7 years in total, and for the first 5 years, to be honest, they were amazing 5 years. He was an incredible guy, but unfortunately, later in the marriage, shortly after our daughter was born, he started drinking a lot more, to the point where it was quite an addiction, and I had some concern. While we were young and I'd first met him, going out and drinking seemed like a good idea, but when you have a baby, you want to be a bit more responsible. And I certainly didn't want my daughter to have the same childhood I had. So I gently would ask him, look, do you think we should be having these parties on so many nights? And true Westie styles, he didn't listen. For those of you who've seen Outrageous Fortune, that was my marriage. And that's not how I wanted to raise my daughter, because I wanted to break that cycle. I didn't want my daughter to have a childhood that I had where she felt unsafe.
So what about it made you feel unsafe? Were there key things that you thought, that's just not right? Yes,
there were. So some of the things, one of the key things was, I remember growing up as a kid, there was a dark club that was built underneath it. And on weekends, particularly Saturday nights, I'd hear fights outside my bedroom window. And when my daughter was young, there would be my husband, very drunk at the time, having fights outside her bedroom window. And so I saw the link, and I didn't want that. I don't want my daughter remembering people getting angry and violent outside her bedroom.
Yeah, you don't want that to be her normal.
I did not want that to be her normal.
Otherwise she would only keep going
exactly.
in that same cycle.
Exactly.
And what about control issues? Were there
Yes.
control issues in that relationship?
Yes, so when my daughter turned 1, I started studying full-time at Auckland University to be a child psychologist, actually, because I want to change the world like many young 20-year-olds do. I saw, coming from experience, I wanted to be a safe person for young people to speak with and to journey with, so that they would know that there is a God that loves them. Which is funny because I wasn't actually a Christian yet.
But you still had that sense within you. How interesting.
Yeah. And I remember the joke is that my marriage ended on sunscreen. So there were times when I was studying at Auckland University, and one particular, I was invited to go to the movies with some study friends, and I texted my husband at the time to say, hey, I'm just going to go to a movie with some friends, and he literally drove to the Auckland University and yelled and swore at me in front of my friends, and I thought, that is so wrong. But more than that, my friends noticed that was wrong.
So your friends had noticed them. Were they saying to you, this isn't quite right?
Yes, and I'm so thankful for those friends. But I think,
did you listen to those friends? Because you've got to be ready to hear it too, don't you?
Yeah, it took probably about 3 to 6 months for me to really hear and accept what they were saying. And I think part of that is because of the childhood I had, it was normalised to be in a violent relationship. So it was hearing an outside perspective that really helped me to see, and I couldn't deny it anymore. And I remember one day I went to get sunscreen from my daughter's daycare, and my husband just yelled at me and was absolutely beside himself because he was very controlling financially. And I said, look, if I can't buy sunscreen for our kid, I think this marriage is over. And that was the pivotal moment for me, where the next day I went to my dad's and I never went back to stay there another night.
That kind of was just like the final straw.
Yeah.
But obviously there'd been a lot leading up to that.
Yes.
And for a solo mum who didn't have a job, and you know, you've got a baby, actually physically leaving must have been hard. How did you make that actually happen?
It was really scary. Something a friend of mine, her name was Trina, and she said something really that sticks with me to this day, and it was, what kind of future or role model do you want for your daughter? And it was that made me realise, and I held that, and I remember going to her house a few weeks after I'd left my husband, and I had shared custody with him, and so it was one of the nights I didn't have him, and I was doing some study at my friend's, and she goes, oh, do you want to hang out for a bit? I said, oh, that'd be great. I said, oh, I can't. I'll get in trouble if I'm not at home in time, because it was like a Wednesday night. And he goes, who's going to growl you? I was like, no one's going to growl me. And that was such a freeing moment, because I lived in fear all that time. And it was having a few people supporting me.
I'm so glad that you had friends who were able to get alongside you. If there's people watching now and they are seeing things, and perhaps their friends' relationships, and they just think, doesn't sit quite right with me, but maybe they can't even put their finger on why. What advice would you give to people?
Trust your instinct. Trust your instinct is what I'd say. If it doesn't sit well with you, it probably isn't. What would I say? Probably similar to what my friend Trina said. What kind of role model do you want to be for your children? What does a safe home look like for you? I had to give up a lot to give that. So I literally lost everything, but I would say it was worth it.
So why is it worth it? What did you gain back? Because
so
you must
much
have
more.
hard times for a few years for you afterwards.
They were really hard times. I had to give up a lot. I literally left with nothing but our clothes and a bed. But now I see my daughter, and she's now a young mum with a brilliant partner who adores her, and they have a lovely little boy. And even just the other night I saw her, and she said, I'm so thankful that you are the role model that you are. Because if I hadn't left, she would have had such a different childhood.
Yeah.
But when I see people who are in similar situations, I remind them, you are so valuable. What role model do you want to be? And you're worth so much more. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved. And coming from a non-Christian background, coming from a background of violence, of being told that no one loves you, and a marriage that echoed that, that's the very heartbeat of my ministry, is what about the other Ericas out there? Who's her voice? Who's reminding them that you are loved, that you don't have to sit with that? And while it may come at a cost, the greater cost is staying.
Yeah.
The greater cost is repeating that cycle, because breaking that cycle is hard, but it is so very worth it.
And that is a perfect place to end. What an encouragement. I hope that encourages people out there watching to just know that you are loved and you are valued by God, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.